All right. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, we have some good stuff, some juicy stuff for today, dovetailing off of previous stuff. But hey, are we ever short on topics ever in life? Like,
No, no,
we're never like Lisa,
I,
please tell the people how many times we have discussed how many phases we need versus how many we want.
yeah. Well, I feel like you could add that to the intro that we are not short on topics because we say it a lot. But
Yeah.
I'm actually reading Chris Hayes, MSNBC host,
Mm.
and he wrote a book called Siren's Call, and it's about attention and the attention economy, and he's
Oh.
kind of working his way up to social media. But it's funny because as you were talking, your phone was buzzing, and I hear the vibrating, and
Oh
my
yeah,
like
yeah,
attention was like drawn to the vibration. Like, and so I was like, oh, that's interesting. Why I was noticing that and I was in tune with it. But I think part of the
yeah.
this issue that we also have 7,000 things to talk about every week is also related to this attention economy, right? And the speed at which information is being shared and then
Hmm.
on to the next thing, and it doesn't go very deep. And so some are kind of the more profound, challenging,
Yeah.
dangerous implications of all of the things are missed because it's just so
So
fast.
much.
And
Yeah.
that's purposeful because I mean he hasn't gotten to this yet in the book, but he says that
Hmm.
there's like the immediate attention, right? Which is why like MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, all of those things have all the things on the screen. So they have like the ticker tape at the bottom, and then they have other things flash up, and then it's like the host, then it's the host and the guest, and then it's back to the host, and then there's an image, and then there's a video, and then it's all of that because we have such short attention spans that they're constantly trying to just get that first bite, but like repetitively, right? Because we don't stay once we've kind of been alerted. And so that's kind of this whole news environment. I mean, and so we're trying to go a bit deeper, obviously, and kind of
Uh,
buck that trend, but it's really interesting. So,
oh, the depth. Well, in that we've talked about this in our field, Lisa, around the strategy of using the sound bite to even remotely attempt to miseducate people in order to
mhm,
sway them in a certain direction. We've dealt with this. Anyone who has talked about the letters DEI in the last even 2 years knows that that
right.
has been the strategy.
Yep.
DEI has been interpreted as this when it's actually this. So for those that can
Hmm.
see my visual, the DEI has been interpreted as something very small when it's all encompassing. But of course,
Hmm.
that was by design. By
Yeah.
design. So
Yeah.
anyway, well, that segues us actually quite well into our word of the week and our phases for today because it is about how we educate ourselves, right?
Hmm.
Especially
Hmm.
as folks that are consumers of information, regardless of the quality.
Right.
Consumers of information. So
Yeah.
here we go into the word of the week. So the word of the week for today is Freedman School. Freedman School. And if you have not done a lot of African American history as far as studying it, please do not be ashamed. Myself, as an African American for the last 47 years, there are many words, phrases, and concepts I was not exposed to even until I was, what, a junior in college and took a couple of African
Mm.
American studies courses myself. So please do not be ashamed of that. Our theory, Lisa, you and I have put our brains together, is that that is also by design,
Yep.
that we don't
Yep.
know certain things.
Hmm.
But freedmen schools were these educational institutions that were established during the Civil War, but then also right after the US Civil War in order to make sure that newly emancipated Black Americans were, in fact, educated on some fundamental topics and areas: math, English, science, even the negotiation of contracts was included in freedmen schools, which I think is quite interesting when you think about entrepreneurship in this country and so
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah.
And so, with that, this was kind of that cornerstone of the Reconstruction era efforts because there could not be the assumption any longer that someone did not know how to read, write, even code switch, dare I say, and negotiate a contract for any reason. And so this really kind of guided Black Americans now into their own type of freedom through literacy, civic knowledge, and just the self-determination of being able to make decisions for themselves, right? So if you have ever been in a situation where you were even mildly inconvenienced by not being able to make a decision for yourself, imagine that is your entire life, your entire existence, and all you knew due to the stain of slavery in this country until
Right.
freedmen schools. And
Hmm.
then it's almost like, whoa, I've got so much freedom. I'm not even quite sure what to do with it because I don't have enough education to maneuver in the freedom.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, with that, freedmen schools are really a cornerstone of all education of Black people here in the United States, which we'll get into a bit more. But for those that have never heard of freedmen schools, it is exactly how it sounds: schools for freed men or people, because girls actually did go to school to a lesser extent. That's a gender issue we'll talk about later. But literally schools for free individuals, newly free individuals in this country. So, Lisa, had you heard of this phrase before either? Because I didn't hear about this phrase until I started studying HBCUs in college.
No, I heard about it from you. I mean, you've mentioned it before, so I had familiarity, but I was never taught it in when I studied American history.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, I didn't study the entirety of American history, right?
Of course. Yeah.
But certainly, um, I took a whole class on, it was like the American South since 1830, I think was the name of it. I can't believe I
Mm-hmm.
remember that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't believe, I mean, it's possible they were covered and I just don't remember. But certainly Reconstruction would have been in there, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
um,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't, I didn't, it's so interesting. I think about this a lot, like, and I wonder if this is true for people in this country learning about British history, is that there was just, even though I learned about slavery and kind of the one drop rule and
Mm-hmm.
Reconstruction and
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm even forgetting the name of this, forgive me, when sharecropping or whatever, all of
Yes,
that.
yes,
I
yes.
didn't like I didn't understand it. It's like I understood it, but I didn't like understand it, right? Like at a
Mm.
deeper level. So I think even if I had learned about freedmen schools, I do wonder if my kind of depth of appreciation of how important they were
Mm.
would have
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
landed. So a lot of that has come from living in the United States and kind of being a
Right,
bit
right.
more, a bit closer to the
Mm-hmm.
brutality of it all, which I was just so distant from. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And again, always, especially if you're a younger person than Lisa and I listening to this podcast, just to give you a little bit of perspective on even the briefness of the timeline, this may sound like ancient history,
Mm-hmm.
but relativity is important, like how relatively long slavery was compared to
Right.
this is not that long. So, for example, let me kind of take you back. So I have my children who are 11 and 14. I am 47 and I remember actually seeing the abandoned one-room schoolhouse that my grandfather was educated in my hometown that was no longer used, but it was still there kind of as a little bit of a historical landmark type
Mm-hmm.
situation there. And so my grandfather in my hometown, whenever we were going in that direction, he said, "Yes, that's my school." That school housed, I don't know if there was technically a kindergarten at that time, but it went up to eighth grade in one room
Mm-hmm.
for Black students. And I'm telling you right now, Lisa, probably maybe the size of your kitchen. That's the
Mm.
size of this building. And from there, and no heat, no water, none of that stuff, just under a roof is about all you're going to get. And so that was for my grandfather, who this year would be 102, 102 or so.
Mm-hmm.
And before him, his parents went to technically freedmen schools, but they were under the American Missionary Association where they went to their usual church. But it was kind of subversive because it was in the fellowship halls in the basements of those churches as a school. so that
Mm,
non-Black people would not be suspicious of their education. So
okay.
I know that sounds like a long time ago, but when I look at the generations of my family, technically it was not.
No, I mean, it's really not, right? Like you think
Hmm.
about, so Reconstruction was, I mean, it didn't last very long, right? And but you
Hmm.
had what, so in that 1860s, 70s, and we're only 150, 60 years from that. And the time
Yeah.
that preceded Reconstruction
Yeah.
was, by some people's accounts, 250, 200, 300 years.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, that's the thing I think is really lost in this whole notion of, oh, we're so past that. Well,
Mm,
actually, there's been,
actually,
yeah, less time
yeah.
from when Reconstruction occurred,
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
on this
Yes.
side of it versus on the other side of it. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when we think about, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but as you think about freedmen schools and thinking about how Black people and any non-white person, to be honest with you, that's educated in this country and how much of an uphill battle it is for those folks to be educated, and even as they're educated, being targeted, we see a long-standing history that is by definition who we have been in the United States for decades. And so, given that, don't be surprised when HBCUs are targeted for no reason, or people
Right.
have a problem with highly educated Black folks making decisions for our country. We have a history of not wanting to educate certain groups that look like me
Yeah.
and
I mean,
women, which we haven't
yeah.
gotten into yet. But
No.
yeah.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that was
So,
that was that was more of a little mini history lesson, which was pretty cool. Maybe we'll
yes.
change. Maybe it'll be word slash phrase slash history lesson of the week.
Right. Throwback of the week. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Uh,
So take us
all
into
right.
phase one.
Phase one. So, if you have not connected with her work, I want you to run to your phone, your computer, your what have you, whatever device you so choose, and pull up Karen Attiah. And that last name is spelled Attiah. Karen Attiah. She is a Black columnist that used to work, emphasis on used to work, for the Washington Post from 2014 up until just a few weeks ago after having this award-winning career, 11 years writing opinion columns for the Washington Post. She was abruptly fired, and she was also, let's put an exclamation point on the end of that sentence. She was fired as the last remaining Black columnist for the Washington Post. And quite rudely, Lisa, how would you feel if you were terminated from your job after an award-winning tenure of 11 years, fired by email? Did not even
Yeah.
have the respect
Yeah.
to let her go to her
Disgraceful.
face. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And so you can actually see a number of different things. I would encourage you to go run and follow her Instagram page, run and follow her Substack column, which she just continued the great work she was already doing with the Washington Post on her page called The Golden Hour. And as an American writer, commentator, editor, she was criticizing the empty rhetoric of the United States. Lisa, we have said some of the exact same words that Karen has said in her work. So, for example, following someone's unfortunate unaliving a few weeks ago, I don't want to say certain words because we know the bots come to get us, Lisa, but after someone's untimely demise, she kind of gave a opinion about not that individual, but about the United States and its leaders' empty rhetoric about quote unquote violence has no place here, or quote unquote this isn't who America is. Of course, every time you hear about a mass, you know what, y'all, we hear quote unquote thoughts and prayers from lawmakers, anyone that's a high profile politician. this type of language has gone on for years. And Lisa, I know we are on record saying, no, that's exactly who we are. As much as we would prefer that not to be the case, we have to look at patterns of behavior for this country. And that has been our pattern of behavior:
Yep.
violence, not accepting who we have demonstrated ourselves to be, thoughts and prayers.
Right.
And specifically, when she was on Native Land talking, which was a wonderful podcast as well that you want to listen to, Native Land. Karen specifically said all she did was bring up the data, Lisa. You know, we love data. She brought up the data points that statistically, according to the FBI and the DOJ, we know that the group that has been particularly violent white men who continue to perpetuate these activities. That seems to be not all, but the overwhelming majority of such violence has been perpetuated by violent white men. And so denying this really keeps us in what she calls this quote unquote bloody status quo, meaning that we never break out of these patterns of behavior because we never want to acknowledge it.
Right.
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 And so with that, as someone who has now been silenced, we've talked about Jimmy Kimmel a bit, we've talked about just censorship in general. And one of the things that I think is very interesting about her story, Lisa, and helped me to weigh in on these particular topics. But of course, number one, free and fair journalism is extremely important. And it's one of those points on the to-do list of fascism, to be honest with you, to get rid of it. That's one of the points of fascism,
Yep.
is to make
Yep.
sure we don't have it. So that's number one. But number two, these forced alternatives to be creative. And what I mean by that is, like I mentioned before, go follow her on all socials. But uh, Karen also had the funding for her course at Columbia. Pretty much it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't approved. And so, because the funding wasn't approved and her class was essentially canceled on race and media, she's teaching it anyway, Lisa. So,
Yep.
on her page, she calls herself the Rogue Radical Professor, and she teaches an entire series, very similar, but much better than mine. I do my equity summer school, but she does her resistance studies series, which is a
Mm-hmm.
summer pilot. And she did that the first time with over 500 students, y'all, over 500. And because she had such a great response to that, she opened up a wait list thinking, oh, it'll be a handful of people on the waiting list. There are 4,000 people on the wait list, Lisa. And
Yeah.
so she ended
Yeah.
up, I mean, think about any university that would have a class filled with 500, they would open up multiple sections
Yep.
of the
Yep.
same course to accommodate students that want it. So, anyway, that point being said, what I think is interesting is that I'm sad that this happened altogether. I'm in awe at the resilience of Black people because this is not an uncommon tactic, y'all. When we think about the freedmen schools, the freedom schools, and even moving forward through, Jim Crow, Brown versus Board that my mother directly experienced, and
Mm-hmm.
now into more of an HBCU era, I think what's interesting is that as much as I hate that we have to be innovative because we're being oppressed, the innovation ends up being better sometimes than the intention, which I think is fascinating. Like we've seen it time and time again, Lisa, when someone decides they want to ban a book, the book almost immediately becomes a
Yeah.
bestseller because it's been
Yeah.
quelled. It seems like the same thing is going on with her, and I'm imagining with other people who are being silenced. And so, Lisa, I'm wondering, what's your initial response considering that here we go again with another form of censorship for people that
Mm-hmm.
know what they're talking about. And it just seems very convenient that, yay, let's tout her award-winning work. But the second it becomes uncomfortable for certain groups, let's throw cold water on a hot flame.
Yeah, I mean, if folks remember back in February, Jeff Bezos announced that the opinion section of the Washington Post was going to just be in support and defense of two pillars, personal liberties and free markets. And opinion sections of newspapers are it's not news, right? It's like if Lisa and Shauna were journalists, we would write what we thought about a thing in an opinion columnist, in an opinion column. It's an editorial section. And So to limit what you can write about is almost like at crossways with the whole point of an opinion section in a newspaper. And then to remove someone because they're sharing opinions that are presumably not supportive of the current administration or critiquing them. Yeah, it is flat out censorship. And but I mean, I wasn't surprised when I saw that she had been fired and I read her
Yeah.
materials on Substack um, about it. And she's suing and she has a pretty damn, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like she's a pretty damn good case
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for it. And it's just interesting because Substack is really, it's booming. I don't know if, I mean, I've
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
on it now for, I've only been kind of like on it. I mean, and when I say on it, I mean a consumer. I don't have a
Yeah.
profile on Substack, but
Mm-hmm.
for 6 to 8 months. And all of these journalists or former Republican members who are quote unquote never Trumpers or, you
Yeah.
know, are all on there and they're doing really great journalism because mainstream media
Hello. Mm-hmm.
legacy media, they're not doing it, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
doing the same thing that you and I have railed about on this podcast 1,000 times, where they're presenting two positions as equally valid when one is
Mm-hmm.
like wacko and the other is pro-democracy, right? Or so maybe like
Mm-hmm.
you got your liberal versus your illiberal, and they're presenting
Right.
the illiberal position as equal to the liberal position, whereas all of these folks, journalists and others on Substack, are like,
Uh-huh.
what are you doing? Right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are you doing? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
and so in many ways, she is likely going to be liberated through this creative step and doing her class in a different way and doing the Substack, among many other things, I imagine, right? And I just find it, I mean, it's great. It's great that journalists and writers and political commentators have these other outlets where they're able to do that. But it's frustrating because I don't know, like how many people go onto Substack? This is just obviously one platform, right? There are on
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
But how
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
do that, right? We're probably not talking millions and millions of people. Millions and millions of people are still watching your CBS, your NBC, your ABC evening
Yeah.
news,
Yes. Yes.
you know?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. That's right.
and
That's right.
so you've got these truth tellers that are finding creative in different
Oof.
ways,
Mm-hmm.
but their exposure, despite the wait list for Karen's class at 4,000, which is still
Yes.
great, but it's still a tiny drop in the ocean, right? So I
Yeah.
don't know. So I'm both
Well,
like excited and buoyed by it, but also like, oh gosh, the audience is still too small.
but you know what's fascinating about this, I'm writing down what you just said about truth tellers because I think we may have found our our title for tonight.
Oh,
But no, but to your point though about the number is that, I always felt like it was Substack feels to be quality over quantity, right? So when we
mm-hmm.
think about how people consume it, people that are Substack folks, those are the people that they're not looking to see the soundbite and look at the cool picture or looking for a quick
Right,
laugh.
right.
They're looking for substance. Like, even if they completely disagree with it, they want more depth to the
Mm-hmm.
conversation, whether it's writing, whether it's a video, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. They want more depth than just a soundbite. So the audience in and of itself for Substack, what I found, has been completely different from all the
Yeah.
others, because think about how many times I laugh at this every time it happens. Think about when someone posts a picture of some sort and someone writes, a caption or what have you, and you can tell by the comments that the person did not read fully what was said on the post in
Right,
Facebook, right?
right.
Facebook, I would suggest Instagram many times.
Yep, yep.
They are not for the in-depth, detailed readers. They're for the scrollers. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for scrolling either, but they're for the scrollers that are looking for more shallow engagement versus Substack. And so I'm like, well, shoot, you're right. When it comes to number, you're right. When it comes to quality, yeah.
Yeah.
I would rather have, 100 on Substack than 100,000 on Facebook because they're just not looking for the depth that we may be wanting to give. I mean, I
Hmm.
just haven't found that based on my few months on Substack either, Lisa. So I think, well, and here goes my other conspiracy theory, even with that though. Whenever you don't own the platform, you're always at risk of the rug being pulled out from under you anyway.
Right.
Whether
Right.
Washington Post pulls the rug out from under you, whether it's actual Substack collapsing, which I pray it doesn't because I've got stuff there as well. If you don't own or control the platform, you're always at risk, whether it's an imminent risk or not. That's part of the reason, Lisa, why, shameless plug, we always want people to go to our website or go to, actually subscribe to our newsletter because if, God forbid, if YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all the platforms completely
Hmm. Hmm.
crash, we would still have our engagement based on those that have subscribed to our newsletter, right? If all
Right.
of that went
Right.
away. And so, the being diverse about where you are, because I've seen even businesses where they only had one platform and when that platform crashed or something happened with the rules or the values for the settings that they didn't agree with, all of a sudden they no longer had a business anymore because they didn't have presence elsewhere. And so, yeah, my hope is that as much as I don't like the censorship, the silencing,
Hmm.
the resulting propaganda that comes from the silencing, as much as I don't like that, I still feel like it's back to Freedmen schools and
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
well, F it. You don't want to put our words on platform or put our content on a platform. We will once again, like we've done in all of history in the United States, build our own platform.
Yeah. I mean, so it's pushing people to develop alternate ways of
Mm-hmm.
communicating, right? And
Mm-hmm.
finding those avenues. It's kind of,
Mm-hmm.
you think about truth like water, and water always finds a way, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
so
yes,
in
yes.
that sense, the truth tellers, the people who have
Mm-hmm.
platforms with enough people following them, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's trickling, and they're finding those cracks, and they're finding ways. And I hope that that just continues to blossom.
Mm-hmm.
So folks like Karen, Attiah, and others, are able to proliferate outside
Mm-hmm.
of these kind of corporate structures that have just so utterly capitulated
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
bent the knee that they are meaningless now, or useless in terms of any opportunity for resistance. There's been a couple of New York Times opinion columnists too, like Charles Blow, I think. He is an African
Yes,
American man.
yes.
He left.
Mm-hmm. I follow
Paul
him. Yep.
Krugman, who is an economist, he was an opinion writer, and he left because they kept telling him to essentially dull down his economic opinions that were not really pro Trump. So he was like, peace out. So he now has a Substack. So it's like there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot. So you're seeing this, yeah, this culling either through firing or through decision because it's untenable, right? And then those folks are now in
Mm-hmm.
other places. So your
That's
point
right.
about the creativity that it's engendering, I think, is an important one. I want it to gain
Yes,
the
yes,
more broad scale momentum, right? I want it to be more important than all of
yes.
the networks and papers that are, you know, basically enabling an
Yeah,
authoritarian. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. By design, by
Hmm.
design, by design. Oh, all right. Well, I think again, we've given you some really great names to go out there and follow. I will just give, the quick pitch of I think what Lisa and I both are saying too around alternative platforms like Substack.
Hmm.
If you're tired of the sound bites, if you're tired of the shallow glossing over, if you want to hear different perspectives on the same topics in ways that are much more unfettered, no platform is perfect, but I'm finding Substack to be like truly like that water that Lisa was talking about, where it really cuts at not just a bifurcated or silenced point of view, but a bit more depth and things that you will sit in and sit with for a bit longer. So might be a breath of fresh air for you to mix it up a little bit.
Hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into phase two.
Okay, so this is funny, folks. Shauna, I was teaching my class the other day, and they were in breakout groups, and Shauna texted me an image, a screenshot of some literacy statistics. And of course, my immediate response was, well, where does that come from? Like, what's the citation? She's like, I don't know.
We have
But
zero
like,
trust, though. We have
I,
zero
I
trust of
know.
any stat that we get. Yeah.
So of course I was immediately went onto the Googles and looked up some literacy stats. But your point, Shauna, in bringing this up was that I think or the point of the screenshot was when we're trying to speak with people, whether it's on Substack or on Facebook or Instagram, and we end up posting some long explanatory comma something about how we're feeling and some history and some education, and it's a whole kind of mixed bag of stuff. But we are making the assumption that people are engaging with us because they either agree or disagree. And then we can sometimes read into a disengagement or a lack of engagement that people just don't care. But what this little screenshot was that you sent me was that it's not necessarily that. It could just be that folks are not really understanding our perspectives or our arguments. And so that is connected to this literacy piece, right? So there's I fact checked some of these stats. And so I went to this website called nationalliteracyinstitute.com. And 21% of adults in the United States are illiterate as of 2024. 54% of adults have a literacy below sixth grade level, and 20% are actually below a fifth grade level. So if you're articulating and writing this like highfalutin argument on your socials,
That's
and,
right. That's right.
yeah, and you want to
Exactly.
have like broad-based appeal beyond your college buddies, um, you have to think about how you're writing the information and how you're sharing the information because this is,
Yes,
you know,
yes, yes.
literacy. The United States ranks 36th in the world in literacy. I mean, there's 190 something countries. That doesn't include all these places that are not considered a quote unquote country, but let's just with the I mean, so that's
Yeah.
like still
Yeah.
pretty. I mean, I would have anticipated it been higher than that, quite honestly.
Hmm.
Um, and so, it's this is something I found. This is something you will love. The top three
Uh-oh.
states, no, you'll love this. The top three states for the highest child literacy rates are Massachusetts, Maryland, and New Hampshire.
Woohoo! We're hanging in there in
Um,
Maryland. Oh, thank
yep.
goodness.
And then the bottom three states for child literacy rates are Louisiana, Mississippi, and New Mexico. New Mexico surprises me a little bit. I'm not surprised by Louisiana, Mississippi.
Absolutely not. Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
And so 3 out of 4 people who receiving welfare benefits, social safety net care,
Hmm.
can't read. And there was that article. Did you see that article in
Mm.
the Atlantic a few months ago that was something related to the number of college students that can't read or don't can't I
Oh my
think it was
God.
can't read.
Mm-mm.
It was something like
Mm-mm.
so people are learning how to get by educationally and in the world without significant reading skills. And in some cases, they are
Hmm.
not literate. And these folks in our lives are engaging on social media, right? They're
Uh-huh.
engaging in discussions
Uh-huh.
in the workplace. They're engaging about things across the dinner table. And so I guess this is definitely a critique of the left, particularly because,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
how do
Hmm.
how are we just ineffective in our communication of ideas and concepts?
Yeah, yeah.
That folks can't even engage with it. So it's not that they're shut down or unwilling to learn or engage. They can't even like get into the discussion because the level at which I am writing, you are writing, other people are writing is just
Mm.
too high.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep,
I
absolutely.
just thought it was such an interesting, it just sent me down a rabbit hole and I thought it was so interesting because there's such an elitism. Like we just assume that we write this piece,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's like
yeah.
self-evident and understandable when it
But
very likely isn't.
this is why, see, now I feel like our K through 12 experiences are so wildly different from one another, Lisa, because there are many times where you and I both, so
Mhm.
for our listeners, please note that our podcast is very lightly produced. Okay. It's called Unfazed, Unedited for a reason. It is very
Mhm.
lightly produced. We don't sit here and read a script to you all. We have some ideas and some things, some topics that have come up in the news or in current events or in some other way from a social media feed, and we want to bring it to you for discussion. And so when we sit down and we think about our word of the week, phrase of the week, whatever word we may use, there's, I mean, 9 times out of 10, Lisa and I have such a funny little exchange around.
Yeah, we
Lisa
do.
will say, "Oh, you think people don't know what that means?" I'm like, "I would bet my next paycheck that no, they don't." Or they think they know what it means and they may have a shallow definition of what it means. And so let's give them a little bit
Mhm.
broader understanding and then let them get curious enough to go look for themselves. But I rarely, and I used to think that just came from my first generation college mentality of I've been treated that way many times where, and I, when I walked into a classroom, there was an assumption of a base of knowledge that I did not
Mhm.
have. And so
Mhm.
I spent a lot of time asking those questions that may have been basic to some people, common information to some people. And I'm like, this is wildly far and away from my experience. And so I just had enough courage to ask questions that probably made me look ridiculous, but I didn't care. I don't care.
Right,
And
right.
so with that, that becomes the conversation, the brief conversation between Lisa and I are, yes, I would love to sit in that perspective, Lisa, and say, yeah, I really do think that everyone should know what the Electoral College is. But will I be surprised if 9 out of 10 people say that they don't know what it is? No, I won't be. I won't be. Or whatever concept we bring up. I'm rarely ever surprised that someone doesn't know something, just because it's common to my experience. And so I try
Mhm.
to leave a lot of space. Now, if someone, I want to stand corrected. If someone is very aware of a concept or a word, please let me know that. That's great. But it's never an attempt to quote unquote dumb things down to someone. I'm just walking in with the baseline cognizance that I don't want to make grand leaping assumptions that we are all working from the same knowledge base or experience around a topic.
Mhm.
And we've seen this too, Lisa, when we're talking about concepts that are very familiar to us around diversity, equity, and inclusion work. If you put 20 people in a room and ask them to define equity, you're going to get 30 definitions, in my opinion, because
Right,
we're
right.
just not operating from the same definition. And so, word of the week helps us to at least operate from a closer definition of words. But given the lax approach, I mean, think about it, Lisa. When you think about K through 12 education here in the United States, I would suggest, based on what I experience, based on what I'm witnessing my children to experience, we usually read about topics that we want to read about if we read at all. Given that, when you have a K through 12 experience that is intentionally set up in such ways that doesn't always allow for that, you must read book A, Lisa, because we need to get through this curriculum so that you can get to testing, so then you can level up to go to the next grade. Versus
Hmm.
you're free to select from 50 titles and pick one that you would enjoy. That's more rare in K through 12 education here in the US. And so, given that, when kids can't choose the topics that they want to read, they choose not to read at all. Now, fortunately, we've come to a place now where we do have more audiobooks and so forth, but that doesn't help with reading. That helps with comprehension,
No. Yeah.
right? So, for
Yeah.
example, with Trey and now with Kendrick more so, we're doing the combination of both. They're allowed to listen to the audiobook after they have read the book. Meaning that,
Mm.
let's say you've read it the first time as student Lisa, great, you've read the actual physical book. The second time in the Gold household, you can read it again with the audio to help you with comprehension or to clarify things that you may not have gotten the first time. But that still doesn't let you off the hook from opening a book and actually reading.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's not happening. And then especially in certain states where yes, they have libraries, but what are in those libraries? What's the
Right.
quality of what's
Right.
in those libraries? I remember, and again, this is not as far-fetched as y'all think. I remember when my grandmother used to say all the time, again, my grandmother's very fair-skinned lineage, and so she had brothers and other people that could pass for white in order to go to certain libraries to access books for them to be able to read a full copy that doesn't have a whole chapter that fell out or pages that haven't been chewed up by rats and vermin because they want to be able to read the entirety of the book. That still goes on in certain places, y'all.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
with that, the deck is stacked against us if we're constantly banning books, if we're constantly setting up state standards that fall well below the literacy requirements. I mean, I surely would not be surprised that people are reading what below a sixth grade level. Would not be surprised.
Yeah. So the actual, I just went back to the website. So the number of people, it's 45 million people are functionally illiterate
Mm,
and read below a fifth grade level. So when you think
mm-hmm.
about it like percentage, right, you're like, okay, what is that? But so there's 45 million people at the fifth grade level and below. Um, and that is there's
Mm-hmm.
330 million people in the United States. So that's like a
Mm-hmm.
decent chunk, right? And then um, to your point about reading a book, 44% of of American adults do not read a book in a year.
Oh goodness. Now, Lisa, let me ask you, what would be your average? How many books would you say on average? And we're relatively voracious readers in comparison to, I would say, the average reader. How many books would you say you read in a year?
I don't know. I do a lot of audiobook listening now. So if you include that, um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think you do a lot more than I do. I'm probably in around like 30, maybe.
30. Oh, that's good though, because I'm last year it was around 22, 23, something around there. Um, Partially because I was reading with other people, some of them, and so we got to discuss them. And then others
Mm.
I read alongside my son that were, at a certain level. So yeah, I would say about 20 something, 20 something. But again, so what was the national average?
Of adults that read a book. So,
Uh-huh.
well, 44% do not read a book in a year. But it doesn't say how many books the average person reads, just that 44% of adults do not read a book.
Incredible. Incredible. And we have more ways to read books now. That's what gets me. Going back to your audiobook point, I mean, I'm not discounting that at all. We have more ways to read books, and we still don't read more.
Yeah, and
Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm.
it is just I think for some people it's time, right? We've talked about this in relation
Yes.
to political
Mm-hmm.
engagement, and so some people just do not have the time to engage at a level of depth that would create a good education level to be able to vote in an informed way because they have children, they have three
Mm-hmm.
jobs. They're like, and there are a significant number of people. That's not like extreme outlier example. There are
Yeah, right, right.
millions of people in the United States that are working multiple jobs and have
Mm-hmm.
children and do just literally go to work, come home, feed the family. Maybe they are able to help the kiddos with homework, maybe they're not, and then they go out for another
Mm-hmm.
job, right? Or one parent's working overnights, one person's working date. Like that's a large number of people. So I think, reading a
That's
book
right.
is in many ways a luxury, right? Having the time to read a book, which
Mm-hmm.
is why I do think audiobooks are a really great thing, because if you are driving to and from work or to and from school or whatever, and you don't have the luxury or the privilege to sit down and read a book, you can
That's right.
listen to it in your car while
That's
you're
right.
driving. So
Hmm.
it's
Or
so
doing
that's
anything else,
yeah, yeah,
housekeeping, anything else,
yeah.
laundry, you can be doing it then. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I also, so then, okay, so of this 44% of people, adults that don't read a book in a year, I'm not sure the reasons for that, but let's say some percentage of that 44% is because they just don't have the time. So then
Mm-hmm.
it's just a larger commentary on how are we, why, why is it that this country has created the conditions where
Ooh.
millions of adults do not have the time to read a book because they
Oof.
are living
Mm-hmm.
paycheck to paycheck. They're working multiple jobs. They have all of these pulls in their time,
Hello.
right? Like
Hello.
that, yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
that is,
Systems. Yes.
yeah. So it comes back from, it's not, so yeah, I don't want to, well, 44% don't read a book because they're lazy or they're disinterested or they, that's not
Yeah,
it.
that's right. That's right.
I'd say that's probably a percentage of it, but that is probably
Yeah.
not most of that 44%, don't you think?
Mm-mm.
So,
Mm-mm. Exactly. Exactly.
then,
And
yeah.
the people that I see reading in my little circles, and I know this is just a sample size of one, obviously, but the people that I see reading most in my circles are the parents like me who are, at that, sports after school activity, waiting on your kid, if you don't have to run an errand or do something else while you're waiting, you're sitting there in your car or outside at a picnic table reading a book or listening to something. Um, and then also, our public library is a great touch point for it. I really see it as a community center because, they have buses that drop kids off at school, pick them up from the library, et cetera. And the majority of people I see coming in and out of there, I'm usually in the public library at least 4 days a week. Um, they're usually homeschool parents, stay-at-home parents, or folks that are retirees. That's mostly what I see there. So anyone that is in a working class situation where they have to work at least one full-time job, but probably a bit more, nah,
Right. Right.
don't have time for that. Don't have time.
So there's this other stat that I know we're running out of time here, but the
Mm-hmm.
approximately 50% of Americans read so poorly that they are unable to perform simple tasks such as reading prescription drug labels.
Oh my gosh, dangerous.
And I had a project that I was working on a little while ago, and it ended up not
Mm-hmm.
getting extended because of federal funding cuts, was related to adult education. So in all,
Oof.
there's a federal law that provides funding to states and
Mm-hmm.
requires adult basic education and English as a second language. So for folks who
Mm-hmm.
don't have their high school diploma, there are options to go back to school to get your GED, which is your high school diploma equivalent. And
Mm-hmm.
so there are these community-based organizations or community colleges or other kind of affiliated
Mm.
educational organizations that offer adult education.
Mm.
And all of the metrics that are in the federal law related to this adult education and English as a second language are connected to job prospects, getting a job, staying in a job.
Mm.
None of them are connected to, can you help your kids with homework? Can you
Wow.
read and comprehend information around political issues so that you can be an informed voter? Can you read prescription drug labels, right? Can you engage with your
Oh my
students'
God.
teacher because you
Yep.
understand the issue? All
Yep.
these kind of associated uh, skills that make people, productive members of society are not part of the metrics or the data. But then, the government just cut all of those grants. I mean, they later reinstated it, but it had like pretty bad
Yeah.
ripple impact on all these adult education programs. So so trying to fix these issues is
Mm-mm.
now
Not a
even more
priority.
challenging than it was, and the measures of success or um you know efficacy weren't things like, how does this person now feel comfortable and confident engaging in society in
Mm.
a different way? Like, they don't have as much shame, perhaps. They feel like they can volunteer. They feel like they can do all these different things because now they just feel more comfortable, right? Like, that's,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you think about how many, even like saying illiterate, there is a image that
Yes.
like
Yes.
that is conjured, right?
Yes.
But a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people are not able to read and write or have low levels of that, not through any fault of their own, right? This isn't
Mm-hmm.
about intelligence, yet we've constructed an identity
That's
that
right.
is
That's right.
associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we take away all of the funding and the tools to assist adults with changing that reality. So I don't know. So it's a system. It goes back. There it goes. It's a systems thing again. So anyway.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a systems thing. And here's the gutter dirty truth of your point around taking the funding away. You said that the funding is meant to resolve some of these issues. I would suggest that there is
Mm,
a contingency that does not feel that that is an issue, and in fact, it is a gift to certain individuals to keep
yep.
one uninformed, unintelligent about certain issues, and uh, impoverished in such a way that they can't make the best decisions for themselves and their families.
Right. Right.
That is a
Yeah.
control strategy.
I'm sure. I'm
If
sure it's
I
in
don't
there.
tell you, if I make sure that you cannot read at a certain level, then when I give you medication for something, you can't challenge that because you haven't read about A, B, C, and D. It very much reminds me. So my friend, I hope she doesn't mind me shouting her out, but she put it on her own social media page to share. She's a breast cancer survivor, and what I think is so interesting about her story, she just posted this not even a week ago about how there are certain bands of insurance that you have that cover certain things. Some of it may cover whether it's your mammogram. Some of it may cover if you need reconstructive surgery on your breast,
Hmm.
one or more breasts, etc. And she was sitting in a waiting room in her doctor's office, and she recalls a number of women going up to the desk. And of course, most doctors' offices, they are not private when they're talking about your business. I mean, it's
Right.
very hard to not hear what's going on, even though
Yeah.
you're trying not to hear. And so there were a couple of women that went up to that desk, and even with insurance, one of them was going to have reconstructive surgery that was going to cost her $700 out of pocket.
Hmm.
And with that, what was interesting, they tried to run that same game on my friend LaShawn, but she said, no, I read my policy every quarter just to make sure I'm up to speed on everything. Here is by letter and verse where it says that I can have unlimited number of reconstructive surgeries that are needed for one or both breasts based on da da da.
Hmm.
But if she had not read,
Yep.
comprehended, and then challenged what was told to her, especially when it's said with authority,
Yep. 100%.
then they would have just believed it. And so she has now found herself like many times going back to talk to the ladies that were turned away, like looking defeated because they're thinking that their policy doesn't cover it when it might, or
Mm.
there are other resources that may be additional coverage that they wouldn't have known about if no one had offered that information. That is a form of control. We know information hoarding is a
Yeah.
form of control. And so, as much as it sounds so, conspiracy theorist, what we do know is think about think about a small child being in your house, for example. This is something that adults do all the time that we make out as a game sometimes, but it is a form of control where you're trying to tell another adult in the room something, and instead of saying it like we're talking right now, you spell it.
Yeah.
So if I want to tell Lisa that, hey, the Halloween candy is on top of the fridge, that was a form of control so that the kid doesn't know that the candy is on top of the
Right.
fridge, right? That's a
Right.
form of control. I communicated in a way knowing that the
Yeah.
child only had a certain level of understanding. I feel like that happens to us a lot when it comes to adults in this country. Let's communicate it at a level that they can't or won't understand it, and let's make sure that we quell their ability to understand it.
Well, and then in some cases get mad at them for not understanding it or not getting on board, right? And
Oh
being
my
like, you
gosh,
just don't
yes,
get
yes,
it.
yes, yes.
You're stupid, right? And just shit
Mm-hmm.
like that. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, yeah, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this was a really interesting, good conversation. So thanks for sending me that uncited screenshot of the literacy statistics because I think
Exactly.
this is important for us to all think about. Yeah.
Oh, well, and it's we're a little bit behind now, but just a couple weeks ago, Lisa, there was the I think it was ALA sponsored the Banned Books Week. And I
Mm,
think that, again, is we're talking about two things that are really important in the stream of episodes we've had lately is around the ability to read and
yeah.
comprehend,
Yeah.
and then the ability to access what you want to read when you can read and
Yeah.
comprehend.
Yeah.
Those are two
Yeah.
topics that are connected, frustrating, but it's a power dynamic. Let me just leave it there.
Hmm.
It's a power
Hmm.
dynamic. Yep. All right, y'all. Well, that's it for this episode of Unfazed Unedited. Look, if you really like this episode, please share it with folks. It sounds like this one is more like a an education podcast. Send it to all the teachers and educators and
Yeah.
librarians that you know. But we want to encourage you to continue to stay in touch with us. Email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com, or you can go visit our website, unfazedpodcast.com, to access all of our shows, both old and new. And if you like this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends, coworkers, or any others in this phase of your life. So, Lisa, we should tell folks keep reading. Until next time.
Yeah. Keep reading.